Hi Tyler, I'm here in my basement workshop because I was thinking a little bit further about one of the questions that you asked in our previous interview, which was, how long does it actually take to make a sash? And especially, how long does it take to make it by hand? And like I mentioned, whether I'm doing the process at work in the shop or for a demonstration, a historical demonstration of some kind, it's a difficult question for me to answer because oftentimes my process has been so broken up that it's been very difficult to get a good read on the complete amount of time that it would take to make a sash. And there is a number of different steps, of course, involved in actually making a sash. And so each one of those has to be properly timed to be able to get a complete answer to that question. But it is a question that I get quite often. And so I decided to actually time at least a couple of the steps that we talked about in the interview to start getting an idea of how long it actually takes to create a sash. So the steps that I timed were the hand planing process of the muttons, which we discussed in the interview. So I did a little bit of planing here, created a couple of muttons, and I was able to find that I can actually create this profile, one side of this profile, in about 2.5 minutes. That's about 35 swipes with the molding plane, with the sash plane that it takes to be able to do that. And if you take a look at a sash, you'll find that you've got quite a number of interior, these are called muttons right here, the interior components, each of which have 2 profiles on them. And then you have the outer frame as well, which are called the rails and the stiles. And these have 1 profile on each one of those. And so that's what you have to create and do profiles on in order to make a sash. And when I did the math to calculate what it would take to actually do that, you're looking at about 35 minutes of straight planing time to create this right here, the profiles of this. And then keep in mind that this is the bottom part of a sash. A sash is only 1/2 of a window, and so this is the bottom part. You'd have an upper component as well with just as much planing to do to be able to create the profiles of that. So that at least gives you a little bit of an idea of what it would take to hand plane all of the profiles on something like that. Now what is remaining for me to do is I'll have to actually take that data that I got, the hand planing data, and then compare it to what it would take to do that same process by machine. And I haven't had the opportunity to be able to do that yet, but that at least shows us what the hand planing process looks like. And then the other process that I timed, because we also talked about this in the video, is the process of chopping the mortises, which we described earlier. So I did some sample mortises here. And the mortise and tenon joint is, of course, what holds the sash together. And so it's going to be a joint that looks like that, where you got one piece going into another. And that's what we have to create. And we talked about how we did that traditionally by hand using a mortising chisel like this. And so I did the process by hand using that very mortising chisel and discovered that it takes about 4 minutes to chop a mortise by hand. And then I was able to time that, or compare that to a machine, because I do have a small mortising machine here at home, which is very similar to the one that I showed you that was at the shop. It's just a little smaller, but it does exactly the same thing. And what I found is that by doing it by machine, I can chop the same mortise in 3 minutes. And so like we were noting in the interview, the process doing it by machine, it's not lightning fast necessarily compared to doing it by hand. You only save about a minute of time, and so you do still have to it still does take a little bit of time to do it by machine. So I just thought that these were some interesting comparisons that at least shed some light on those 2 parts of doing a window, the planing, the profiles, and the chopping of the mortises. And in time, hopefully I'll be able to time more components of this and get a more complete answer to the question. But for now, I hope that at least sheds some light on the 2 processes that we talked about in the interview.